Coogs House. It's time to give Houston a handful of national titles because Auburn and the SEC have told us that's how the game is played now.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. We're enjoying the conversation, but you don't know what to say. Tell us in the comments down below if you consider goldfish animal crackers. Think about it. And then today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. More on ways to make sure you are doing the most to make the most out of your money later with Monarch, a great place to keep track of all your finances. More on that fun later because we're talking about adding national championships to the Houston Cougars today in the first segment. It's going to dominate the whole first segment. Second segment, we're going to talk about the FPI and why I think it's a little bit extra flawed. Third and final segment, talk about other Big 12 things to keep an eye on. But first, as we said, Auburn has laid out the blueprint here. The Houston Cougars can just add national titles whenever they like. Whenever they want to. Auburn decided they're going to add titles in 1910, 13, 14, 57, 58, 83, 1993, and 2004. Now, listen, I understand that this is in large part a marketing play. They're going to put these up on their stadium now and do whatever they want to in that sense. But this is how the game is played. Now, these are valid, and frankly, each of them has some other random one-off poll that they found themselves ranked number one in. So you and I can create the Locked On Cougs poll and go back in time because some of these polls did involve going back in time. And we can just call ourselves national champions. That's how it works. Yes, some of these teams from Auburn did win all of their games. But like the 1910 national title they're now claiming, Auburn went 6-1, lost 9-0 to a 5-2-1 Texas team. But they were still ranked number one in the Maxwell ratings by Lauren Maxwell. Yeah, in 1913 they went undefeated, and in 1914 they went 8-0-1 with the fun fact being they allowed 0 points on the season that year. They also tied a game versus a Georgia team that, while I was not alive in 1914, their record indicates they were just about average, right? 1958, they tied a middle-of-the-pack Georgia Tech team. They wwere still called the Montgomery Full Season Championships champion for the nation that year. They won in 11-0-1 in 1983. Yes, they did have undefeated seasons in there, but it's odd to me to go back and add, first of all, to add national championships from pre-integration is certainly a choice. Not everyone being allowed to play feels kind of icky and odd to go back and be like, well, we were still the best team in the country. Like, well, were you? You weren't even allowed to play everybody, but I digress. And in 2004, like, we saw that play out in a BCS championship style format, and they weren't in the game. Now, they were undefeated, but there's nothing to indicate that they wouldn't have gotten waxed by USC and Reggie Bush, just like Oklahoma did. So, I don't think that that's fair. This is straight out of the UCF playbook, and maybe that means it matters even less, right? This is what they're going to do over there at Auburn. And I decided that since you don't have to go undefeated to claim a national championship, I'm going to give a national championship to the 2015 Houston Cougars, the best Houston Cougar football team I've gotten to see as a team. They went 13-1 with a Peach Bowl win, finished number 8 in the AP rankings. Who could forget that season? For what it's worth, I would say that being that team in the American as well, I think that they deserve a seat at the table. And frankly, like, they only got to play in the Peach Bowl as opposed to something better because they went 13-1 the American and not in like the Big 12, like Oklahoma or something, right? In talking to folks older than myself, they pull up like 1976, 79, 73. kind of in that order, it sounds like. And again, that's older than myself, but 79, I would point out, is the highest they've ever finished in the AP poll, finished fourth. They did go 10-2. Fourth in the AP poll, we know, would be in the top four for a college football playoff scenario, right? So theoretically, that lines up to beat number 4 Maryland in the Cotton Bowl that season. They also beat the top 10 Texas A&M team, top 5 Texas Tech team, and 30-0 blank to top 20 Texas team. Running backs that went over 900 and 500 yards, both had 8 touchdowns. They had a guy had 10 interceptions, which I triple checked that doesn't read real. But that's what happened, apparently. 1979, finished 5th in the AP poll. Also beat a top 10 Nebraska team in the Cotton Bowl that season to finish 11-1. The one losses to a one-score game to a rival. Nebraska had been a Big 8 contender in that year. 73, they finished 9th the AP poll. 11-1 with 2 ranked wins by 3 or more touchdowns. They had 2 different guys score double-digit rushing touchdowns that season as well. I also, for its worth, would think the 2011 team is in contention here. Yes, they went 13-1, and they played 2 ranked teams that season because they're in Conference USA. But I would point out that at 13-1, they're in the top tier of whatever, and that the reason they didn't get to play more ranked teams was the Conference USA of it all. They beat Penn State in a Ticket City Bowl. And also, I think that as far as media darlings go, where we pick college football teams, the Case Keenum at all would have mattered a whole heck of a lot. And I think that's where I land on this is ultimately, for so long, this was a gigantic beauty pageant that all Auburn's doing now and all UCF did is say, well, actually, we were the prettiest one there because we said so. And I'm saying Houston should just do the same thing. Because why not? What does it do to anyone else to have multiple national champions? Because yes, top teams played each other in bowl games, but they were just picked. And then after all the games happened, the Associated Press would just pick a national champion. Now they might see who won between that Texas and Arkansas game that's legendary or whatever. Sure, they might wait to see what happens before they made their choices, but ultimately people were just picking. And that goes to show this isn't like college basketball. And I heard Kelvin Sampson say this once when Houston went into the Big 12. Heard him say it again more recently on Damian Dotson's podcast. Great episode. But in college basketball, you can be the Cinderella. You can win your conference, make the dance, beat the good team, show everyone you're on top of the world, right? You didn't need to move from the American to the Big 12 to win a national championship in basketball necessarily. Yes, more than half of the big dance are at-large bids, but the other half are automatic qualifiers that you get by winning your conference just to be good enough. And if you're upset about playing a good team in the first round, guess what? You're probably going to have to beat them anyway, right? In college football, it still doesn't work quite like that. Yes, the power conferences get in, one group of 5 team gets in. That group of 5 team is ultimately picked as well. You can't just win all your games and be good enough in football to get picked to play in the game. That's the way it goes. That's the way it's been. And frankly, while I disagree with the way it's behind closed doors and picked by people that have ties to TV executives and whatever, currently, I will say there's at least a number of teams, and then those teams get to play it out now, right? The BCS was a computer system that had its flaws, but it was not just writers picking because of who they wanted to watch or whatever they saw after that, right? It was at least some sort of a date. You could game the system, but there was a system. And before the BCS, it was just people picking. And that is all to say that this college football picking a champion thing has always been kind of screwy. Auburn's the latest to point that out in what's kind of a dramatic fashion. So why let them be alone? Let's join the party. Let's do it ourselves. Let's say Houston wins in 5 national championships. Suddenly, Houston's a 5-time national champion program. Who don't want to come play for us? Now, it doesn't quite work like that, obviously. I do think Houston's building something pretty special in the present tense. I do think those teams, 2015, 2011, I went around for 73, 76, 79. I do think those teams were also particularly special in the past tense. But I do think that this conversation about what it is a national champion before you get to the playoff is certainly a conversation starter, and certainly one that Auburn cannot be the only one to take advantage of. We can't let the SEC do it. They're just adding arbitrary national champions. The Locked On Coogs poll just awarded the Houston Cougars 5 national championships because I said so. Now, I do want to tell you more about other polls and what other people say so in a second. I got problems with that. Before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Monarch Money, because most people can't name all the financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data and visuals to get categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without even ever touching a spreadsheet. And I teach history, so I don't want to do spreadsheets. That's not my job. I got teaching, coaching, podcasting, all those things in one, and it all comes out in one easy to read thing on Monarch Money. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code Locked On College at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first. Yes, 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code Locked On College. We also brought to you today by our buddies over at OpenPhone. If you're running a business, every missed call can be money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on, and that's why you need OpenPhone, so you never miss an opportunity. If you need to get this for your business, I highly recommend using OpenPhone and the AI features. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. You don't have to juggle multiple phone calls at once. The AI agent handles after-hours call as well, answers common questions, captures leads. You never miss a customer ever again. See why over 60,000 businesses trust OpenPhone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Seems too good to be true, but OpenPhone is no missed calls and no miss customers. Park Rangers Locked On Cougs here. Going from fictional, made-up polls awarding national championships to data polls that seem to not have any idea what goes into a football game. Now, ESPN updated their FPI over the weekend. FPI is their football power index, something like that. It's analytical models supposedly giving the result of your team playing a neutral team. They run the simulation 20,000 times per their own data, and using the index and things like that, they figure out the average points your team scores compared to that neutral team, and then they rank teams based on that score. So Houston, the Big 12, got a negative 1.1. That was dead last, as it was the only negative number in the conference. And listen, I think what that really does, as we see other experts look with their eyeballs and say, hey, I like what Houston's doing. Hey, Houston could upset some people here. Hey, Houston's the best money on FanDuel. Hey, Houston, people are saying that. We talked about that yesterday. It's not just me. I do think what you're seeing there is people looking at things a computer can't see, right? Even if that data-based model were to pull in, let's say, Connor Wegman's stats and make him the quarterback for Houston, we know with our brains that Connor Wegman played last year hurt. It's been well documented. We found out more about it in January and March. He had a really severe shoulder and ultimately turned into his whole throwing arm injury last season. He's fine now, but that clearly impacted how he played last season. That doesn't go into the data, right? Jason Brooks, talented offensive lineman, looks like he may start at left guard for Houston. Might move up to right guard, but I think he's going to end up playing left guard for Houston. We talked to Cody Stovall, Locked on Oklahoma State, when Jason transferred. Queso, right? And ultimately, Cody, on his own assessment, said that Jason Brooks started the games the year they went to the Big 12 championship game. They lost that Big 12 championship, but he went to that game as a starter. And then in 2024, coaches felt like they were on a hot seat. They had to make some changes. There was some politicking involved, and coaches went with guys that they had recruited or had ties to or whatever. And Jason didn't get to play a whole lot. Oklahoma State lost a lot of games. The data is going to pull from last season, Jason not being able to play much on a team that didn't win a whole lot of games. It's going to skew the data when we can think with our brains and look at data from the season before where he played a lot and played really well and they won a lot of games, right? Like these impacts, and it's all skewed. It's computers doing the things. And what I don't quite get is honestly why it's so challenging to do this kind of thing. Why is it so challenging to have a fully well-rounded computer set of data? And if you can't do that, why are we investing in computers and AI to do this when we should be investing in people and their eyeballs to do this? And why are we paying people to do this with their eyeballs and brains and so on that don't use those eyeballs to watch all the games? Like all of these things don't make sense because that seems to be what's consistent about what's being predicted on Houston's season next year. Because when you hear someone who's watched the video, put the things together, looking at the new roster, going back and watch those players really play, people get excited really fast. I told them in yesterday's episode that both Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football, and Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12, were higher on Houston than many. And Drake had them at 8-4, right? And I listened to a clip on Twitter where Taylor McGargo, was a quarterback at Rice. He's now an analyst. I think he's going to be involved in Big 12 production through I think it's TNT, but it might have been Fox. Sorry if I got that wrong, Taylor. Taylor's a good guy. But it sounds like he's higher on Houston after looking at what they're pulled in and the receiver corner they're pulled in and Tanner at tight end and all those different things as well, right? I think a lot of people that are able to look for themselves are finding positive. Now, people aren't predicting them to win a national championship. I don't mean to say that. We're not at that point in the rebuild. But I do. I guess we could pull up our own arbitrary poll and award it. That's what we just talked about in the first segment, right? I do think though that Houston, it stands to reason, is honestly doing better than the data models would indicate, and needs people to really watch them to fully understand what they're doing, right? Like pulling in Mackenzie Agnello, who played at New Mexico last year as a center and played a bunch of different spots in the offensive line. Like it's hard to quantify that in a way that he's going to impact Houston this year, right? You could talk about, Rook Brown or different DBs coming in and changing divisions or changing group of 6 to power 4 or whatever in college football. And it's not accounting for that quite as well, or not smoothing out the transition there. It's interesting to see how these models go. And even with the models, when they take that negative 1.1 that the FPI gives Houston and extrapolate that across their schedule, it says there's a 42.8% chance that Houston wins 6 or more games. It says that the mean, the most common, or the average, and then the most common results for Houston will be between 5.3 and 6.7 wins. Even the most negative data set is going to argue Houston should be looking at bowl games. Start getting your plane tickets. I hope it's not a driving to Texas, but I guess if you go play in Jerry World is kind of fun. But like let's get out and travel a little bit. That's what the data is telling you. That's what the numbers are saying, and I don't think it's crazy to start setting expectations there. Now, things got to go right. Things can't go wrong. Yada yada yada. But even the most negative projection here is putting Houston in a bowl game. I think that's what we've all been trying to say here for about 6 months is like, guys, this train's moving and it's moving forward. I was watching Thomas the Tank Engine the other day with my toddler. I didn't realize how often trains move backwards. Thought that was kind of a rarity. Thomas certainly moves backwards a lot to go pick up buddies or whatever, but this train, Willie's train, is moving forward. And I don't like the ESPN FBI for a lot of reasons, and I think there's a lot of flaws in how they accrue the data and how they use the data, and how I wish they would just pay a lot more people to use their eyeballs and get a lot more eyeballs on college football. Beggars can't be choosers. If wishes were fishes, no man would starve. But even those beggars and those people that need more fishes, looks like they're looking at more wins than I think people realize. And so Houston's in a good spot. More on that throughout the week. Now, this week, with Thursday being officially a week from the game, we are going to be kind of getting ready like it's a game week all week long, kind of getting ready for the season, etc. But Houston's not the only team playing on week 0/1. I want to talk about other games Big 12 fans need to have on their radar. But before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Prize Picks, because this episode, brought to you by Prize Picks, is the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason's already heating up. College football isn't far behind. Whether you got your eye on the big name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Now, listen, if you are really high on the Texans, or even if you get on the MLB playoffs or whatever the case may be, flex options can be a big game changer in football. I highly recommend getting in on things as football starts heating up here. One of your picks misses, you can still double up your money by using the flex play option. PrizePicks puts their members first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel. Now, August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. And if you're here with the Coogs, you're bold enough to do this. FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions, whether you're calling MVPs, eyeing long shot division winners, think you got an idea who to crown a Super Bowl champion before week one even kicks off. This is your moment to do all that on FanDuel Futures Day. If you think CJ Stroud can do it, get that MVP award, FanDuel Futures Day. You think the Texans are going to win the South, FanDuel Futures Day. You think you have an idea of who the dark horse in the Super Bowl hunt is, FanDuel Futures Day. Visit FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. Power Rangers Locked On Coogs here. And listen, we are eagerly counting down at this point, it feels like hours before Houston kicks off with Stephen F. Austin on Thursday night of week 1. It is going to be exciting kicking off the second year of the Willie Fritz tenure at Houston. Big year for the program. Future is bright, etc. But staying in the present, this is going to be a fun season. As we get to that, there are a number of games I think Big 12 fans and Houston fans, as Big 12 fans, should be paying extra close attention to. And I'm not going to lie to you, it did pain me to say you need to watch other teams, but they're not happening when Houston's playing. And I think that there's a number of games here that the Big 12 can really bolster its resume in college football. And that's important for Houston, because as you're building this program within the Big 12, your ceiling is kind of where the Big 12 is, right? So you want to see the Big 12 build its brand up, because then you're also building your brand up. Now, the longest shot here as a countdown from 5-1 is Nebraska at Cincinnati. Cincinnati, Satterfield may be coaching for his job. Nebraska is not the Ndamukong Suh Nebraska or the black shirt defense Nebraska or anything like that. But this does feel like an uphill battle for Cincinnati. If Cincinnati were to pull this off against a Big Ten opponent, whatever you think of Nebraska in the present tense, I think people would assume Cincinnati's in at least the same spot or worse in the Big 12, that would indicate that the conferences are on a fairly even playing field when it comes to that playing field. So Cincinnati, Nebraska, one you got to keep an eye on. Colorado, Georgia Tech, Deion Coach Prime's number 4 game here. Count it down. Deion needs to prove he can coach a team that does not have a Heisman Trophy winner on it. Further, he needs to prove he can coach a quarterback that is not his son. They've got great quarterback play coming in. They don't even know if it sounds like Salter's going to start, but whatever, right? It does feel like this is a uphill battle for Colorado as well. Georgia Tech was pretty good last year, took Georgia to the brink. They're a strong AC. I think they were 4th in the ACC last year. Colorado finished, frankly, around there in the Big 12 last year, but expect a regression, right, given the talent lost. It's also a chance to prove that those recruits Deion brought in are paying off, paying dividends, right? And it's a big, big game for the conference in that sense, especially because the Big 12 and the ACC are fighting out for that 3rd place spot. I think the Big 12 is in the lead right now, but they're fighting out for the 3rd place spot. It's also a big-time TV matchup as far as the channels and stuff like that goes. It's going to get its own TV slot. TCU, North Carolina, similar kind of concept. It's my 3rd game. Listen, TCU won a college football playoff game, and while it's been a downward spiral since then, including a week later, the championship game for TCU, this is a chance for them to kind of put the Big 12 back in the right spot. Ultimately, they lost Colorado back when Colorado was a Pac-12 school, and it kind of looked like the opposite at that point. I think the Pac-12 fell apart. TCU, North Carolina, Belichick. I think Belichick can coach. I think he's about to find out in a rude kind of way that college ball and pro ball are different. The margins, the way you win those margins, et cetera, are different. I don't think he can't do it. I don't know he does in year 1. I think TCU can take great advantage. Sonny Dykes has been a great college football coach. Most of his stops, won a lot of games. I think that this chance to really show off for TCU and show the Big 12 versus the ACC kind of thing. I was thinking as North Carolina gets better over the course of the season, those are 2 teams that could be comparatively ranked within their conferences, right? So that will be important later. Another big game for this conference over the course of week 0 and 1 is Farmageddon. Now, I'm not going to try and step on the toes of Nick Maravets or Christian Rao at Locked On Cyclones and Locked On Kansas State, respectively. Those guys have been killing it all summer, previewing for this game a little bit each week. But Farmageddon happening on Dublin, so you want to call it an Irish potato farm. Irish potato Farmageddon? That's actually a cool name. They should have done that. Farmageddon happening over there is a big, big deal for the conference because it's 11 o'clock Texas time, so noon Eastern. ESPN Week 0. It's the first college football kickoff of the year. It's also, for it's worth, like first meaningful football kickoff because preseason football in the NFL doesn't matter. It's an international thing, so all of Dublin, Ireland, and it's made for where it's European prime time as well. Like these things are all working together. This is about you want a good game, competitive game, big time plays for touchdowns, fun hits, crazy chaos at the end. Like this is selling the Big 12 brand to an international audience in a way that I just feel like Houston would only stand to benefit from if it went well. Now, if it's a blowout and one team not so great, then you kind of need that team to blow everyone out. So it looks like just a really dominant team, right? And also, for what it's worth, if you think Houston can make a run at a Big 12 title game, while Iowa State and Kansas State are not on the schedule, you would theoretically, I think the winner of that game is going to get one of the 2 spots in Arlington, just by virtue of like having a leg up on the rest of the conference the rest of the year, right? So we'll get to that when we get to that, but that's a game Big 12 fans need to get an eye on. Last but not least, full circle moment here. Baylor and Auburn. Cam and Zach at Locked On Baylor and Locked On Auburn are doing a great job of previewing that one too. Big game start of the year, make for fun content, but honestly, Baylor needs to prove that the last handful of games last season were not a fluke, that they got screwed a little bit in the rankings, the preseason AP polls, and this, that, and the other thing with the Big 12. Frankly, Auburn's done their own like gamesmanship coach speak where they're not really telling you who they think they're going to play 3 quarterbacks and that 3 different coaches are going to call plays. And that's all bogus. They're just trying to mess your heads a little bit. But I do think that this is a moment for the Big 12 to say we can beat SEC football teams because, look, Auburn's had good years, Auburn's had bad years. Auburn analytically had a pretty strong year last year and lost more games than they probably should have. And before you say, well, that's because the SEC is so tough, they also built up that strong analytical resume against SEC schools, right? So I think that's kind of a wash. I think they just can't close. But either way, Baylor here getting to prove the Big 12 is in the same running with these schools is important here. We just saw Arizona State push Texas to the brink in the college football playoff. Opening this season with Baylor pushing Auburn to the brink and beating Auburn would be a big deal. Further, look, I know I'm throwing some shade at Auburn all episode here, but Auburn's not the best team Baylor's going to play this year. If Baylor's going to fill their own hopes of winning the Big 12 or whatever Cam and Drake say they're going to do, potentially, they need to be able to beat Auburn, right? And so that's interesting to see how that starts off the season. So that's 5 non-Big 12 games you keep an eye on in the next 14, 10-ish days of college football because college football's here. It feels like we're hours away from Farmageddon kicking off on Saturday. College football's here. Season's here. Park it. Watch some games this weekend. We're going to be previewing Houston, Stephen F. Austin, getting ready for the game week, getting ready for the season starting tomorrow. But breathe. College football's here. Thank you all for tuning in today. The Locked On trivia question from last time was how many head football coaches has Houston had? If you don't count the one-offs, like the guys that just get a bowl game because so-and-so leaves early or whatever, they had 15. If you include those, you're up to 17. So I count the 15. Will Fritz being the 15th head coach at Houston. Trivia game for tomorrow, sticking with the Auburn theme that bookend the episode here. What is Houston's all-time record in football against Auburn? And before the recent Birmingham Bowl, I'm not going to tell what year, recent Birmingham Bowl, how long had it been since Houston played Auburn, those Tigers, and something about an eagle over there too? Tell us in the comments down below. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs. I'm probably supposed to say this part where you subscribe, we keep our jobs and all that, blah, 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 right? Anyway.